Hello everyone, welcome to another video full of mystery, terror and suspense. Before we start, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm Arlindo Chagas and I'll be with you, narrating these incredible and supernatural stories. Now, turn off the lights, grab the popcorn and put on your headphones. Prepare to be breathless. My name is Marcelo and this is my story. A few years ago, I decided to embark on a solitary hike through a forest renowned for its legends and eerie tales. The forest was dense, the trees towering above like silent sentinels, and the deeper I ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. After hours of walking, I stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin nestled in a clearing. It looked as if it had been left in a hurry. The door was ajar, and the windows were broken. Despite a feeling of unease creeping over me, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to explore inside. The interior was dark and musty, with cobwebs hanging from the corners and dust thick on every surface. As I wandered through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I tried to brush it off, but the sensation only grew stronger. Then I heard it, faint footsteps echoing behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. The silence was deafening. I continued to explore, finding an old journal lying on a decrepit table. The cover was worn, and the pages yellowed with age. I opened it, and my eyes widened as I read the entries. They detailed dark rituals and invocations of spirits, each one more horrifying than the last. As I read, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. My breath became visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, the pages of the journal began to flip on their own, as if an unseen hand was guiding them. I tried to close the journal, but it felt as if it was glued to the table. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I heard a whisper right behind my ear. "You shouldn't be here." Panicking, I yanked my hand away from the journal and backed away. The whispering grew louder, turning into a cacophony of ghostly voices. I turned to run, but the room seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the door now a distant point. The shadows on the walls began to move, coalescing into human-like forms with glowing eyes, watching me with malevolent intent. I finally reached the door, busting out into the clearing, gasping for breath. The forest seemed darker, more menacing than before. I didn't stop running until I was miles away from that cursed cabin. Even then, the feeling of being watched never left me. For weeks after, I had nightmares of those shadowy figures and the cold, accusing whispers. I tried to forget, to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew what I had experienced was real. The cabin in the forest held secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. Years have passed, but the memory of that day haunts me still. I never returned to that forest, and I warn everyone who listens to my story to stay away. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and some secrets are best left buried in the past. My name is Ricardo and I've been a taxi driver for over 20 years. I've seen many things on the night shift, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that fateful night. It was a cold, rainy evening, and the streets were unusually quiet. I was driving through an isolated part of town when I spotted a man standing by the side of the road. He was drenched from the rain, wearing old-fashioned clothes that looked out of place. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" I asked. He nodded silently and got into the back seat without saying a word. His presence sent a chill through the car, but I tried to shrug it off. "Where to?" I asked again, but he just pointed straight ahead. I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, and his eyes met mine. They were dark, almost hollow, and I felt an inexplicable sense of dread. As I drove, the atmosphere inside the car grew increasingly eerie. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I could see my breath forming mist in the air. The man sat motionless, staring straight ahead. I tried to make small talk to break the silence, but he remained mute. The radio began to crackle with static, and I turned it off. That's when I heard it, a low guttural murmur coming from the back seat. It was barely audible at first, but it grew louder and more insistent. It sounded like he was speaking in a language I couldn't understand. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as fear gripped me. "Are you okay back there?" I asked, my voice trembling. The murmuring stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was deafening. I glanced in the mirror again, but this time, the back seat was empty. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed on the brakes and turned around, but there was no trace of the man. The door hadn't opened, and there was no way he could have disappeared like that. Panic set in as I realized I was alone. I checked the rearview mirror again, and to my horror, the man was back, his face inches from mine. His eyes were empty voids, and his mouth twisted into a sinister grin. I screamed and swerved the car, nearly crashing into a tree. When I managed to regain control, the man was gone again. The car was empty, but the cold lingered. I floored the gas pedal and drove as fast as I could back to the city, my heart racing. When I finally reached the busy streets, the temperature returned to normal, and the strange occurrence seemed like a distant nightmare. But the nightmare wasn't over. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the same guttural murmur. It was coming from inside my house. I checked every room, but there was no one there. The whispers continued, growing louder and more menacing. I could feel his presence, watching me, waiting. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers followed me everywhere. I started seeing his reflection in mirrors, his sinister grin haunting me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was a wreck. I tried to tell people, but they thought I was losing my mind. One night, the whispers reached a crescendo, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around, but there was no one there. The fear was overwhelming. I packed a bag and left my house, vowing never to return. I quit my job and moved to a different city, but the memories still haunt me. Every time I see someone standing by the side of the road, I feel a pang of fear. I know he's still out there, waiting for his next ride. And every night, I hear the whispers, a chilling reminder that some passengers are never truly gone. My name is João, and this is a story that has haunted me since my teenage years. It all began during a hot summer in our small town. My friends and I often sought refuge from the heat at an isolated lake hidden deep in the forest. It was our secret haven, a place where we could swim and relax without being disturbed. One evening we decided to camp by the lake. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the water, and the air was filled with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. We built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and shared stories, laughing and enjoying the serene surroundings. As the night deepened, a sense of unease settled over us, but we ignored it, attributing it to the natural darkness of the forest. Around midnight, I woke up to a strange noise. It was a soft splashing sound, like something moving in the water. I unzipped my tent and peered out, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The lake, usually calm and inviting, now looked menacing under the pale moonlight. The splashing continued, more pronounced and deliberate. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly made my way to the edge of the lake. As I approached, the splashing stopped, and an eerie silence enveloped the area. I scanned the water with my flashlight, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just as I was about to turn back, I noticed ripples forming in the center of the lake. My heart pounded in my chest as the ripples grew larger, and something began to emerge from the water. It was a dark, shadowy figure with glowing eyes staring directly at me. Paralyzed with fear, I couldn't move or scream. The creature slowly moved towards the shore, its eyes never leaving mine. As it got closer, I could see its grotesque features. It had a humanoid shape, but its skin was covered in scales, and its fingers ended in long, sharp claws. It emitted a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I stumbled back, tripping over a rock and falling to the ground. The creature stopped, tilting its head as if assessing me. Suddenly, it let out a deafening roar and lunged towards me. I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could back to the campsite, my heart racing and adrenaline pumping. I burst into my friends' tents, screaming for them to wake up. Groggy and confused, they emerged, but the creature was nowhere to be seen. They didn't believe me at first, thinking it was a prank or a figment of my imagination. But the terror in my eyes convinced them to pack up and leave immediately. We gathered our things in a hurry, constantly looking over our shoulders, expecting the creature to reappear at any moment. We made our way back to town, the journey seeming to take forever. When we finally reached safety, I recounted the entire incident to my parents and the authorities, but no one took me seriously. They dismissed it as a wild tale, a result of an overactive imagination. Despite their disbelief, I knew what I had seen. The creature's eyes, its growl, and the overwhelming sense of dread were too vivid to be a mere hallucination. I never returned to that lake, and neither did my friends. The memory of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked in the darkness. Years later, I heard stories from other townsfolk about strange occurrences near the lake, disappearances, eerie sounds, and sightings of a shadowy figure. The legend of the creature grew, but no one could confirm its existence. Some said it was a guardian spirit, others believed it was a curse. But I knew the truth. The creature of the lake was real, and it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. Whenever I close my eyes, I can still see those glowing eyes, and I know that some secrets are better left undisturbed. My name is Paolo, and my fascination with antiques has always been a passion. I love the history and stories behind old objects. One day, while browsing a quaint antique shop in a small town, I came across a beautiful, ornate mirror. Its frame was intricately carved with symbols and designs that seemed almost otherworldly. I felt an inexplicable draw to it, and without hesitation, I bought it and took it home. I hung the mirror in my living room, admiring how it added a touch of elegance to the space. That night, as I settled down to watch TV, I noticed something odd. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the mirror. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but when I looked closer, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced back at the mirror. The figure was gone, and all I saw was my own reflection. Shaking off the unease, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. I would catch glimpses of the shadowy figure in the mirror, always standing behind me, always watching. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. The air around the mirror grew colder whenever he appeared, sending chills down my spine. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw the man again. This time, he didn't vanish when I turned around. He remained in the mirror, his grin widening. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I tried to move, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The man raised a hand and beckoned me closer. Against my will, I found myself walking towards the mirror. My reflection seemed to fade, replaced entirely by the man's image. He whispered my name, his voice a cold, rasping echo that filled the room. "Paulo," he said, "come closer." I was inches away from the mirror now, and his hand reached out as if to pull me in. I could feel a force tugging at me, drawing me towards the glass. Panic surged through me, and with all my strength, I broke free, stumbling back and falling to the floor. The man's face twisted into an expression of rage, and he began pounding on the other side of the mirror, the sound echoing through the house. I grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror, trying to block out the sight and sound of him. The pounding stopped, but the cold presence remained. That night, I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of the man in the mirror. In the morning, I decided to get rid of the mirror. I couldn't bear to have it in my house any longer. I took it down, careful not to uncover it, and carried it to the garage. As I placed the mirror against the wall, the blanket slipped off, revealing the man's furious face once more. He mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I could feel his anger and malice. Desperate, I covered the mirror again and left the garage, locking the door behind me. I hoped that would be the end of it, but the terror followed me. Every reflective surface in the house began to show glimpses of the man. Windows, water, even my phone screen. He was everywhere, watching me, tormenting me. The sense of dread grew stronger each day, and I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, I awoke to find the blanket removed from the mirror in the garage. The door was still locked, but the mirror was uncovered. The man was grinning wider than ever, his eyes filled with malevolent glee. I knew then that he wouldn't stop until he had me. In a desperate attempt to rid myself of the curse, I smashed the mirror into pieces, hoping to destroy his hold on me. But as the shards scattered across the floor, each fragment reflected his image, multiplying his presence. His laughter echoed through the garage, a sound that chilled me to the bone. I left the house that night, never to return. I moved to a different city, but the man's image still haunts me. Any reflective surface is a potential gateway for his presence, and I live in constant fear of seeing his hollow eyes and sinister grin again. No matter where I go, I can't escape the man in the mirror. His curse is my burden to bear, a reminder that some obsessions can lead to unimaginable horrors. My name is Marco, and this is a story that has haunted me for years. When I was younger, my family moved to a small, rural town. My parents had purchased an old farmhouse on the outskirts, a place that had stood empty for decades. The house was a fixer-upper, but it had charm, and my parents were excited to turn it into our new home. From the moment we moved in, I felt uneasy. The house was cold, even in the summer, and strange noises echoed through the halls at night. My parents dismissed my concerns, attributing the sounds to the house settling, but I knew something was off. One evening, while exploring the attic, I found an old dusty trunk. Inside were photographs, letters, and a diary belonging to the previous owners. The diary was filled with disturbing entries about strange occurrences and sightings of shadowy figures. The last entry was particularly chilling. The darkness is closing in. It wants us. We must leave before it's too late. I showed the diary to my parents, but they laughed it off, calling it a work of fiction. But the unease grew stronger with each passing day. Doors would creak open on their own, lights would flicker, and the air was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. One night as I lay in bed, I heard faint whispers coming from the hallway. They were soft at first but grew louder and more insistent. I got up to investigate, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers led me to the attic, where the trunk was now open, its contents scattered across the floor. As I picked up the diary, the temperature in the room plummeted, and I could see my breath forming mist. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and spun around, but no one was there. Terrified, I ran back to my room and locked the door. The next morning, I told my parents about the whispers, but they brushed it off as a nightmare. Determined to uncover the truth, I began researching the history of the farmhouse. I discovered that the original owners had mysteriously disappeared, and the house had a reputation for being haunted. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the atmosphere in the house changed. The air grew heavy, and an oppressive silence fell over us. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. My father went to check the fuse box, but before he could reach it, we heard a loud crash from the attic. Grabbing a flashlight, my father and I cautiously made our way upstairs. The attic door was ajar, and a cold wind blew through the house. As we entered the attic, we saw the trunk in the center of the room, surrounded by the scattered belongings of the previous owners. The whispers were back, louder and more menacing. We heard footsteps behind us and turned to see shadowy figures emerging from the darkness. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and they advanced towards us. My father grabbed my hand, and we ran downstairs, slamming the attic door behind us. We barricaded ourselves in the living room, but the whispers and footsteps continued. The shadowy figures appeared at the windows, their eyes fixed on us. My mother was hysterical, and my father tried to calm her down, but the fear was overwhelming. Desperate, I remembered the diary and its final entry. The previous owners had tried to leave, but the darkness had trapped them. I knew we had to get out of the house. We grabbed what we could and made a dash for the front door. As we stepped outside, the whispers turned into screams, and the house seemed to shake with rage. We didn't stop running until we reached the town, where we sought help from the local authorities. They accompanied us back to the farmhouse, but the shadowy figures were gone, and the house was silent. Despite our pleas, no one believed us, chalking it up to overactive imaginations and old house noises. We moved out the next day, leaving the farmhouse and its dark secrets behind. The memories of that night still haunt me, and I often wonder what became of the shadowy figures and the whispers in the dark. The farmhouse stands empty once more, a silent sentinel of the horrors that lie within. Some say the house is cursed, others believe it's a gateway to another world. But I know the truth. The darkness is still there, waiting for its next victims. And every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the whispers, a chilling reminder of the terror that lurks in the shadows. I hope these stories have brought you the suspense, terror, and drama you were looking for. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more chilling tales. Until next time.